Welcome to Living 4D with Paul Chek. Today's guest is veteran ultra-endurance athlete and breathwork specialist William Burnett.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Living 4D with Paul Chek. Today we have an important topic to discuss, the PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder epidemic. My guest is William Burnett. He's a very interesting guy with a very interesting background. He's been in the military for many years, and his own challenges with PTSD and his own healing process brought him to the awareness that there was a lot he could do to help people with PTSD in the world, and he's doing a fantastic job of it. So today, we're going to go on a tour de France of what PTSD is, all about it, what can we do about it. And I'm excited for all of you to engage William with me. William, welcome.
Thank you, brother. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. And actually, how this podcast came about is interesting. William was in my sound healing workshop. What was that, about a month ago?
Yeah.
And he just came up to me, had a little chat, and started talking about what he does. And I said, oh, how interesting. I've been looking for somebody to talk to this about. And it had been on my mind for quite a while because, as I shared with you, I've worked with a lot of PTSD patients in my career, and I know how complicated the issues is, and I've had my own. And as I said, I think everybody in my family has PTSD. But with the busyness of everything that I'm doing and so on and so forth, I had my radar up, but I hadn't had time to really find out, okay, who's the PTSD expert I should go find. And so it was almost like the universe just put you right in front of me at the right time. So I'd love to start with a definition, William, of what PTSD is, just so everybody knows exactly what we're talking about.
I'm going to give you my experience in PTSD or what I would consider the symptoms of PTSD. We've had a conversation previous to this when we talked about my opinion about it. And currently, I believe the Western medical system has created this diagnosis to simply put people in a box and start treating them from this place. Yet the treatment's still not adequate enough because we see PTSD statistics and suicidal statistics on the rise, right? And so for me, PTSD is more of a biological reflex, for someone personally experiencing some sort of trauma in their life that they've not been conditioned to. Mm-hmm. And the trauma is manifesting itself into its own personality. Yet these reflexes that we're experiencing continue to grow, create a personality, like I just said, creating their own personality. And there's no more discussion about, the person as an individual. We talk about a deeper study of an individual, where this person has come from, what their story is.
Right.
And I said this to you before, like PTSD feels too finite to me. It's like, this is the diagnosis, this is what you have, we're going to treat it with meds or drugs.
Well, that's the point, right?
Right.
From a medical perspective, anything they can put into a diagnosis, they can make drugs for. And having studied this a lot, if you really study how they do it, they actually take drugs and relabel them. So they take a drug that's for one diagnosis, then they relabel the same drug so it looks like another drug, and they prescribe it for another diagnosis so it looks like you're actually getting a drug that's specific for your problem, but that drug's actually being used for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different things. It's just a way to sell drugs.
Right.
And unfortunately, the whole VA hospital system doesn't really do anything but sell drugs.
But these drugs aren't doing anything.
No, they're making people worse.
They're making it worse. They're shutting off receptors. They're shutting down neurological pathways. And so most people are finding themselves in this situation of like numbness, right? When we're a lack of feeling. And man, we're at a point in time right now where we're witnessing how that has gone for us over time. Don't feel your feelings. Where are we at with that?
Yeah, right here.
And so these drugs are numbing people. Now, in my experience with PTSD symptoms, much rather than a diagnosis, we can be doing a whole lot more by discovering the intricacies of this person's lifestyle. That being where they've come from, what family systems they've come from, what geographical locations they've grown up in, That includes, but not limited to, the nutrition that's been available,
Yeah.
the financial support that they've had, or the stability that they've had in finances, whether that be through mum and dad or themselves as an individual. We can look at the social aspects of what they're experiencing, and if we dive deeper into the intricacies of these stories that these people have, we're going to gain a better understanding of why this person has responded to the situation at hand that has manifested itself into trauma. Now, a lot of people consider trauma to be the event that occurred that created this imbalance in the system, right? And biologically, we'll experience an imbalance in hormones. We'll experience an imbalance of chemicals being released from the brain to the body. Psychologically, we start to develop new patterns of behavior based upon what's going on. But, the trauma isn't the thing that happened. The trauma is the result of what we perceived ourselves in that reality, how we experienced the event, how we related to it. And now as it manifests and develops its own personality, now the trauma starts to manifest, right? And just to be clear for the listeners, like, it's thrown around too often that trauma is this thing, right? And it can be quickly discovered that if we dive into the intricacies, as I was saying, of these people's stories and learn these lifestyle factors, we're going to be better prepared to treat this PTSD symptom and actually remove the risk of it growing exponentially.
Yeah. Well, just for the listeners, give us some of the hallmarks that would be indicative that someone does have PTSD.
We'll look at demographics first. We're looking at, predominantly the conversation is in around veterans, and a lot of my work is with veterans. But veterans aren't the minority or the majority here. We have people that have experienced some level of molestation as a child, been raped, people that are experiencing acute or sudden responses to an event. First responders experience this. There's often that, we have volunteer firefighters that are arriving to the scene. Joe's just come from chopping wood all day. He's a volunteer, and then all of a sudden he's arriving to a scene that is presenting information that he is not conditioned to witness, right? So that's the demographics we're talking about, and we can go deeper into TBI, like traumatic brain injuries, and people from explosions, sporting events, industrial accidents. The list goes on in terms of demographic. When we're looking at the psychological and biological reflexes of PTSD symptoms, we're looking at depressive mood disorders. We could be looking at alcoholism, addicted to drugs or painkillers. We could look at disassociation, isolation from society. The list goes on with that.
Yeah, so I'd say most of the PTSD that I've treated in my career has come from head injuries, predominantly from combat sports, car accidents, industrial accidents, things of that nature, fighting, a lot of it in cage fighters, boxers, and then all the other things you mentioned, of course, and so any kind of physical or psychological trauma. You can imagine being the weekend warrior firefighter you talked about, showing up to see a body half burned and children, consumed half by fire and stuff that's just very shocking to see. I mean, most people would probably pass out if they even witnessed the slaughter of an animal, which is why I tell people, if you want to cure your overconsumption of meat, go to a slaughterhouse and witness a slaughter. That'll, give you, but I might be exposing them to PTSD. But the other one that I've seen a lot of is sexual trauma, rape, mostly rape in childhood years, and that causes a long series of problems. And I think there's a lot of violence in families. I remember reading Basil van der Kolk's book. The title slips my mind right now. Basil van der Kolk, the
Body keeps the score.
Your body keeps the score. Yeah, the statistics on family trauma are pretty shocking. I mean, I don't remember. It was like almost 50% of families have a lot of trauma in them,
right?
Like physical trauma.
Yeah,
And the other stat that shocked me was something like over 50% of active military are on psychotropic drugs. I'm like, holy shit. I had no idea it was that bad. And so when you start looking into the, experts on trauma, like Basil van der Kolk and what's the Canadian physician?
Gabor Mate.
Mate. I've read 2 of his books. And people like Peter Levine, who I've studied several of his books. You start realizing that we're just not a very healthy people worldwide.
No.
It's and there's a lot now. There's a lot, as you know, of trauma therapists emerging, and it's easy to find videos on YouTube and Gaia TV, and I mean and I think COVID really is sort of push the PTSD awareness right up to the surface, like beer bubbling to the top and creating foam. It's like, okay, everybody's realizing, because I think all the isolation and all the psychological psyops stress pushed Humpty Dumpty off the wall for a lot of people. I mean, people that were dealing with, all sorts of unhealed issues that are contributors and compounding contributors to PTSD. When COVID happened, it just pushed a lot of people right off the other edge. And we saw that with rapidly escalating suicide rates amongst young people. 20 years and younger was the highest group of suicide victims. And I saw a real good documentary on these things showing the statistics. And it was like a 20% increase in suicide rates amongst young people just since the beginning of COVID. That's a pretty serious deal. I mean, you're talking about massive numbers of people committing suicide. So there's a lot going on. You talked about the story, and I've studied the human story a lot. I've studied mythology extensively for many years. And I took a course from James Hillman, who's a very famous Jungian analyst and professor of Jungian psychology. And the course was called Tracking the Gods, and it's all about what myth is and how it plays out in our lives consciously and unconsciously. And he said something in there that I wanted to bring up because of what you said earlier about stories. And he said that it does not matter whether a person's story lines or the key markers in their story are fact or fiction, because it affects them the same, and there's no difference within a person's own psyche between fact or fictional perception of their experience of life. And a good example of this is you can have people that were raised in families that have PTSD type symptoms and other serious psychological symptoms, but on evaluating their cases and even interviewing their parents, I've often found that their upbringing wasn't traumatic at all. But of course, I'm comparing it to my own childhood,
Right.
or to the childhood of others that I've worked with as a therapist that had, serious physical violence and things like that. But what the research shows and what I've found through my own investigations is it's each person's perception of their experience. And so what may not seem traumatic to me at all could be perceived as very traumatic to that child or that individual. And because their perception is the basis of their reality, if they perceive that they're not being loved or that they're being abused or belittled or psychologically messed with, now they wouldn't say my dad's messing with me psychologically. They might just see, every time I'm around my father, he tells me how useless I am or something. So then their inner story begins to craft itself. And when you look at what the story is and the magnitude of how bad things were, and then you interview the parents, it's like two completely different stories. But what James Hollis showed is it doesn't matter if it's a factual perception. If it's in their story, even if it's amplified or made up, it affects them as though it's real. And I think the point I'm wanting to bring to the table is that PTSD does not have to come from something that somebody else thinks is a terrible trauma. It could be something that the individual has a significant enough stress response that if it doesn't get healed, then it begins to accumulate, right? So the next insult adds to it, then the next insult adds to it. And the overarching response to that is things like seeking drugs to get rid of the pain, or cutting oneself, or fetishes, or addictions, or violent behaviors, or serious problems in relationships, or learning disabilities. And because each of us is unique in the way we perceive and experience and process our own inner world and our trauma, what may not seem threatening or stressful at all to me might be very stressful to you or the person sitting next to you, which goes back to something you alluded to, is that we can't use a cookie cutter approach and assume that, okay, you have to have, for example, if you were to do research on what chronic fatigue syndrome is, there's two classic models. They use a 7-point model and a 14-point model. So as a therapist, if someone comes to me with a diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome, there's 7 points on their body where I can press into them. And if they have pain in all 7 points, by that model, you have chronic fatigue syndrome. There's another one that has 14 points. So they're saying, well, you got to have more than those 7, right? But the point is there's a cookie cutter. Now, it could be that an athlete did a CrossFit training session 2 days ago and all 14 points are sore, but now they've got a diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome and nobody in the physical therapy ward or doctor's office has a clue what CrossFit is and how you can get global inflammation. And all of a sudden now you're on drugs and you got a label. But the point that I'm trying to bring to the surface here is that you can't really use that kind of diagnostic model, which is a standard medical approach for almost everything. If you check these boxes off, you've got this problem. And they don't look any further than that. I mean, how many doctors are going to listen to your story when the average doctor spends 6 minutes with a patient, right? So what we end up having is a very confused PTSD environment where people are getting misdiagnosed or not diagnosed or ignored. But when they do get diagnosed, they get put into a schedule of commonly used drugs, none of which address the story, the perception, or the experience that a person has. And I think that points out two things. We continue to see that our medical systems worldwide are very dysfunctional. And two, we continue to see that the standard approach to treatment in many areas of medicine is still based on a cookie cutter approach, and it's not based on a skillful investigation of a person's life and how they're perceiving the events of their life, which leads to what we've got with PTSD, people all over the world living in tents now because they're being basically extricated from society. They don't fit in.
Right.
There's a saying I teach all of my students: the pain is seldom where the actual problem is. For example, I've seen many cases of rotator cuff problems that wouldn't heal even after surgery, but what most doctors and therapists overlook is that the right shoulder is under influence from the liver and the left shoulder the stomach. Once we apply the principles of detoxification, support digestion, and clear parasites, presto, shoulders start healing and working beautifully again. If you learn to see people holistically, like I teach my students in Holistic Lifestyle Coaching Level 1, you begin to see the true source of our illnesses and injuries. HLC 1 teaches you many essential approaches to health and well-being, such as how to assess what key body systems are under too much stress and how to restore balance, the importance of identifying a realistic dream goal or objective that inspires each individual to stick to their healing program and make the short and long-term changes that are necessary, my universally applicable 1, 2, 3, 4 formula for assessing and correcting challenges, how to breathe optimally to enhance energy levels and mental clarity, how to use gentle movements to work in and enhance life force energy and support optimal immune function, how the function and health of the soil that food is grown in influences all systems of the body, including our mental emotional stability, and much more. HLC1 is just a small part of what we teach our Chek Academy students, our education system for elite trainers and health professionals. Gavin Jennings and I designed the Academy to take you from wherever you are right now, even if you have no fitness or health education, to being one of the best holistic health and performance professionals on this planet. And as a Chek Academy student, you'll be able to help a lot of people reach their health goals in ways you never imagined. There is, in my opinion, nothing more rewarding and meaningful in life than helping other people look, feel, and live better. We are now accepting applications into the Chek Academy, so whether you're wanting to change your career or add a truly effective new dimension to your current skill set, now is the time to apply. Go to chekinstitute.com/L4D Academy. That's chekinstitute.com/L4D Academy. Let's make the world a better place together.
We're seeing PTSD as an identity now, and that story of having the identity gives people a framework to live from, a place to live from.
Yeah.
Now, you brought up a fantastic point about what could be creating a high level of arousal in the system for me might not be the same for you, right? Veterans commonly will say most veterans are returning from combat with PTSD. Now, I would argue that if most veterans are returning from combat with PTSD because of the job to which they were put in, then we're essentially saying that what they're training for, they're not conditioned for. Now, this isn't to say that, what they're witnessing in combat isn't affecting them. It very much is. What we're looking at here is, outside of the veteran community, something that is creating a high level of stress or arousal in the nervous system is manifesting in the system.
Yes.
That means that anything from that place now, the individual is starting to learn its own behaviors and starting to live from that place.
Yes.
Now, if someone gets diagnosed with PTSD, it's a fantastic label and identity to live from because I don't know the self before that, or I don't want to know the self before that because it's too dark, right? Because I experienced the event that caused the trauma. Now, coming from that place, we start to develop characteristics because it's being signaled to us. Now, if I go to a therapist and I'm displaying symptoms of PTSD and the therapist starts going through his cookie cutter, or she starts going through a cookie cutter process, I'm now starting to relate to the symptoms as an individual.
Yes.
Because it's being signaled to the body.
Yeah.
Now, if we look in this COVID pandemic where kids are in houses being locked away because we're told we're not allowed to leave our homes.
Right.
And some of these environments are quite volatile and abusive. This child is being raised in an environment to which later on, that's what they're conditioned to.
Yeah.
Now, when they leave home, and I've seen this in my experience working with people in a therapeutic setting, they've grown up in environments that were abusive and volatile. Now, when they don't have that and they leave home, what do you think they're going to look for?
Well, they're going to go look for what they know.
What they know. They're finding it in relationships. They're finding it in work. They're finding it in lifestyle factors.
And if they don't find it, they create it.
They create it themselves. They self-sabotage their own lifestyles.
Yeah.
And now, here in this moment is where we can't take a cookie cutter approach because there's too many variables that are playing a role, right? If we're being raised in these environments that are volatile, abusive, our fathers are telling us we're useless pieces of shit, and that's what we grow to believe. That's what we grow into.
Yeah.
Now, if you add in there, levels of stress from food, maybe an influx of technology, if you add in there levels of stress from school or being bullied at school, being poor, these start to compound on the stress that is already present in the system.
Yes.
We're taking them from a sympathetic tone, a sympathetic nervous system, to even further, and that put them in a dorsal-vagal state.
Yeah.
Right. So they're already stressed as hell, and now we're adding more.
Yeah.
The pandemic's done exactly that. Not only has it done that,
By design,
now it's starting to teach the younger generations what is the new norm. Face masks. No longer can we see facial recognition of others. We can't search for ourselves in other people's facial expressions because we can't see them.
Yeah.
Body language. Well, we need to stay 2 meters apart.
Yeah.
there's no contact, there's no energetic exchange, there's no touching, there's no intimacy.
It
right?
turns people into objects.
It really does.
Yeah.
It's starting to dilute the very fabric of what we're built upon as human beings.
Which is classic brainwashing strategy.
And it's been happening since we were children.
Yeah.
Now we're experiencing a rising level of PTSD, in my belief, is because it's such an easy label to attach to. Because if I don't belong to something, then what do I belong to?
Yeah.
The I.
Yeah.
We had this conversation the other day. I was talking to you about my children and being the I. I know that my children could stand in a room and say, I am in the room, because they're confident in knowing who the I is.
Yes.
It confuses the fuck out of me that people go out and learn all these things and project themselves into the world as all these qualifications, certifications, and they don't know who the I is.
Yeah.
How can you know what anything else is if you don't know what the I is?
Well, all you can do is project your programming onto the world. You're basically just a control bot.
And now we're environmental signaling people.
Yeah.
We're signaling each other's biology by the way that we are behaving and showing up in society.
Yeah.
Now, our body, my mentor teaches this protocol or philosophy about having this black box inside of us, right? We've got information, that being our reality, and what you were saying about perceiving ourselves in our own reality. That's where the information comes in. We call this input. Comes into the body and goes through a process, a system process.
Yeah.
Each individual is going to process that information separately and differently. The
Yes.
yellow wall behind us, I'm going to see a different type of yellow to what you are, and we're going to process that information differently. The outputs, when it comes out of the black box, out of the system processing, the output is our participation in our lives, in our realities. And that is the cycle of how we are perceiving ourselves, to where we are creating the stress based upon the stories we are telling ourselves.
It's a classic Pavlovian stimulus response.
Right.
And physiologically speaking, there's what's called facilitation of the central nervous system. And having worked with thousands of chronic pain patients, what the research clearly shows, and I actually co-wrote 2 comprehensive articles on this called The Ghost of the Machine, about how the whole field and science of musculoskeletal rehabilitation has taken soul out of the equation, and they just treat people as mechanical objects. But what central nervous system facilitation shows is every time we have a painful event, it becomes easier for us to be in pain.
Right.
And it gets to the point where the whole pain system starts to run away, and you get people that are basically in chronic pain all the time, even though there doesn't seem to be a cause for the pain. There's some pain pioneers called Melzack and Wall. I've studied their work quite extensively. They've got like a massive book on all their research. But they show that within the nervous system, you can create, through constant or too much exposure to painful events, whether physical, emotional, or mental, what's called a reverberating circuit. And they've actually shown that with certain people, that once these neurons start coupling and they get facilitated, they actually run the pain signal in a loop and it won't go away. And so you get people that go through therapeutic interventions and the therapist is doing everything, but the patient's saying, my pain's still there. And so the therapists and doctors often label them as people that are faking their pain to try to avoid work or to stay on disability. But what Melzack and Wall showed is that through facilitation of the central nervous system, the system gets so over-ramped up and so excited from these repeated exposures to pain or trauma that it actually starts like an echo chamber. And that's what's called a reverberating circuit. And I think part of the problem is that most therapists haven't done enough research into the actual anatomy, physiology, and psychology of pain to understand a lot of these things. So a lot of the people that are getting what would normally be standard therapeutic approaches aren't working because they've already crossed that threshold of facilitation, and the system is now basically keeping itself in pain. Because a way to look at this is, if somebody mugs you and you're walking down a certain street in town, you're going to know every time you approach that street that it's dangerous there,
Right.
and you're going to be on red alert.
Yeah.
So what happens is you ramp up that person's fight or flight perceptual experience. So they're basically like an ADD person who's scanning the environment constantly for threats. So if a person gets to the point where they feel like they're always under threat, then the system, the adrenaline and the cortisol just stay at high levels, which leads to chronic health problems. It burns the system out, and a whole long list of other things. And I think that part of the problem is that most people don't know how to calm the system. Fortunately, now the whole vagal system's starting to become popular, so we've got books on, various techniques such as deep gargling and light stroking and many things that you can do to increase vagal tone and calm the system down to switch it more parasympathetic. We've also now got, thanks to Wim Hof, a breathing revolution.
Right.
And so now there's many experts. I just interviewed Sarah Shermoli recently, and she does a technique called effigy that I told you about. You seem to have your own system you've put together. And there's a lot of people approaching the breathing aspect of it. But once you get an excited system like that, one of the things that people don't look at is if you're not getting enough sleep, it'll ramp that thing up like crazy. If you're eating toxic foods, it'll hypersensitize the system. Sugar.
Yep.
And there's a huge amount of inflammatory agents added to foods, chemical agents. So if a person's also drinking toxic water, if they're not getting enough exposure to sunlight, enough movement. So if you start looking at what it is the body needs to balance itself and come back into homeostasis and how many ways you can excite the system, you see that, like, you just look at the lockdowns, what they told everybody to do, it goes completely and utterly against even how you approach a viral illness. It's literally like turning the system against itself.
Yeah, it's collectively upregulating everybody's nervous system.
Yeah.
Right. And finding those variables right there, that's just the beginning of the journey in downregulating the nervous system. And that's what we're talking about here. Now, something I want to point out is to dive deeper into that, the metaphysical aspect of what people are experiencing as a result of these PTSD symptoms. Now, if we experience an event that creates a stimulus in the system so much that it gets us to a point of arousal, that we have a big dump of adrenaline and cortisol, and we come down out of that event, right? If we don't process the event, that emotion that we created or experienced in the event becomes trapped in the system.
Yes.
It becomes trapped in the blood. It becomes trapped in the tissue, in the bones, anything and everything that is the fabric of who you are, it will be trapped in. Now, if that emotion stays around long enough, it starts to manifest. Now we start to see blocked energy. We start to see blocked emotion. People start to experience physical ailments as a result of the trapped emotion. And this is where it becomes quite controversial for the mainstream approach to health and fitness, is because we associate injury or pain or ailment with something that occurred as a result of a physical injury, or my favorite is when people being diagnosed by their family members to have a certain health condition because mum, dad, pop, and granny had it as well.
Right.
That's my favorite one, because people will say, oh, well, your mum had this, you're going to have that when you get older. Well, that individual at that time doesn't necessarily have that neurological pathway already firing and wiring to say that they're going to have that sickness or that disease. They don't necessarily have it. But if you told that person for 15 years that they're going to have that with words, well, guess what's going to happen?
You get a nocebo effect.
Right. Their biology is going to start to believe it, and their brain's going to start to fire and wire the exact pathways that needs to create that disease.
Yeah.
So what we're looking at is unprocessed emotions, unprocessed energy in motion, which is emotion, and now that's being trapped in a system, being manifested. So the event that may break the camel's back may not be the actual event that caused the stimulus. It could be previous. It could be in childhood. It could be in utero, right?
Yeah.
Mum could have been part of a stressful environment through gestation to where baby experienced absolutely all of the stress that she had. And then the birth itself could have been traumatic. We could go into the birth. We probably shouldn't, but we could go into where birth is in today's society.
I've had a couple of podcasts with Nathan Riley, who's a world-class holistic OBGYN who went through Chek holistic lifestyle coach training, and we've gone into the birth issue quite a bit, but the hospital has made birthing a traumatic experience for any woman, healthy or not.
In its own, the start of pregnancy, it starts right there.
The first thing they start doing is telling you all the ways your kid's going to be sick and dysfunctional and all the tests you got to run and this disease, that disease. But it's just like how to scare the shit out of people, get lots of money, do lots of tests, and find lots of reasons to make them think they have to have a doctor on call 24 hours a day.
Right. And so that process in the start of people's life, like the first 10,000 days of someone's life, is the developmental framework of who they're going to become. Right?
How many years does that work out to be?
It's like 23, 24 that they end up being. So early adulthood, and men start to mature around 21 to 23, get to that
the
stage.
ego in a healthy culture, the ego forms around age 21 to 25, so it fits that.
So that framework, we're being signaled by somebody else's ideology, which we could just politely say that that's society's ideology, right? You've got a doctor who wants to rush a woman through because he's got to go play 18 holes with his buddy, and we got to get her on the table, get the baby out. He's got to wash his hands and go swing some clubs.
Yeah.
Like that's the current narrative.
Or get more on the table so you can make more money.
Make more money.
Yeah.
Or, we follow the money. We follow where the answers are, right?
Yeah.
And so stress is beginning there. Now, to my point, metaphysically, this emotion is getting trapped in the system. We're developing a psychological narrative, which you and I discussed briefly before around the mind virus, right? Paul's work. And then we're also starting to see that our biology is starting to participate in a very physical way, a material way. We're starting to develop the patterns and behavior of this dis-ease, which long-term, untreated or treated with drugs to dull the pain and numb the pathways, turns into disease. All right.
Hi, everybody. I'm here to tell you about one of my favorite Symbiotica products called the Omega, and it is called the Omega because it's the Omega. So I've asked Shervin to come in and give us the lowdown on the Omega, and I can tell you before he starts talking about it, it tastes damn good and my kids love it. So Shervin, what's the Omega going to do to help any one of us that we need help with?
Well, there's so many things that once you take the Omega that it immediately does in the body. But, let's focus a little bit on the astaxanthin that's in there. As you know, you've probably seen videos of me where, we have our astaxanthin facility outside of Reykjavik in Iceland, and that's where we grow that microalgae, and that's where we extract it as well. Astaxanthin is the strongest antioxidant in nature. We know that. And astaxanthin is nature's protector to outside energies. What's an outside energy? Oxidation,
right?
Sunlight, anything out there that can cause things to get old, to get withered down and break down. And it's the algae's protective force.
Right.
So we take on that energy along with omega-3 DHA, EPA. We also have organic sea buckthorn in there.
Right.
This is omega-3, 6, 7, and 9. So we're hitting it on all levels. We also put phosphatidylcholine in there, which bridges it all together. So with this product, you're getting full skin protection. You're getting brain protection, cognitive protection. You're getting all the things that you would need in an oil that's protective. So I look at the Omega as a protective balancer for our modern lifestyle.
And I know Mana loves it. Is it good for kids at pretty much any age?
Absolutely. It's good for mothers. It's good for children. It's good for the elderly. This is universal.
And with all those fatty acids, it must be great for mothers that are breastfeeding.
Absolutely. I mean, this is what she'll pass on to the child, and she'll know where it comes from. It's not coming from China. It's coming from a wild heirloom strain in Nova Scotia. It's coming from Iceland. It's all cold pressed. It's the best ever. It's probably one of our best formulas.
I love it too. I feel it immediately when I put it in my body. So go to cymbiotika.com. That's symbiotica.com. On checkout, use the code capital C, capital H, capital E, capital K 15. That's Chek 15. While you're there, make sure you check out all their other products, and your 15% discount is across the board. If you have kids or if you want just good general health, immune function, and just overall good vitality, go to the Omega.
Now, these practices that we're seeing work from Stephen Porges, the polyvagal theory, right? That's his work. We've got Wim, who's really created a bridge over a humongous gap for us to bring ancient technology and wisdom of breathwork back to the modern world. Now, this is just the entry because if the system's so upregulated, you're not going to be able to teach it anything. You know this. You've been doing this work for over 30
Yeah,
years.
well, once a person's in a high arousal state, they're left brain dominant. That's the brain of doing what you've always done.
You can't break their thought about themselves.
Yeah, it traps them in a loop. It's actually a threat to our survival to learn something new if we think we're running for our life.
Right.
That's why I always say it's a bad time to throw in a cartwheel if you're running from a lion. In other words, creativity, there's no room for creativity when you're in a sense of
state of survival.
Survival.
That's right.
So
we call this like sympathetic, the sympathetic nervous system being outside the cave, or parasympathetic nervous system being inside the cave. We're outside the cave, we're on high alert, we're hunting, we're probably being hunted. If we're inside the cave, it's cozy, it's warm, we're with our people, our tribe. Right now, nervous system responds exactly like that. So bringing people into a space, which I love that you brought that up, is, breath work is not. It's not the key to break it all, right? It's the pathway in to understanding our nervous system a lot better, so that we can unpack the years of trapped emotion that is stored in our very tissue. And I'm seeing that in my experience of working with people closely one-to-one in group therapy. I imagine most of the listeners could say they've seen on social media. They always see this. We don't have to name names, but there's always one or two breathwork practitioners in the world that post these super dramatic photos of somebody having a huge cathartic release, and it's great. I'm glad that people are coming to this space, but that's not it, right? That is occurring as a result of people accessing a deeper part of themselves. It's what comes after that we're missing the point. And this is where I believe we could start approaching PTSD symptoms and lack of symptoms with a new way of education, teaching people how we can beat it before it becomes something.
Yeah, I think that's it's important, it's true, but it really requires a revamping of our whole education system, and we don't have a system that teaches parents how to be parents. So we've got, imagine, to sort of an analogy, imagine if all of a sudden the military started recruiting people off the street to go to war and skipped basic training, how many people would get killed by their own fellow soldiers because of fear and doing stupid things with weapons and explosives and whatever. So if we are dealing with a PTSD epidemic and we're still using dysfunctional models of thinking and educating and relating, the healing has to start at the family unit, because that's where it begins. I mean, I would say far more PTSD comes out of families than it does outside the families.
Agreed.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of football players with PTSD, and there's a lot of skateboarders with it, and there's a lot of motocross riders with it, and there's a lot of boxers and kickboxers with it, and there's a lot of car accident victims with it. But there's a lot more people that got PTSD from a traumatic family.
Right.
And so we don't have manuals for parenting. We don't have manuals for preparing for childbirth. Hardly any. I've had to coach and counsel many young men in particular because they go into a case of psychological breakdown when they have a new child and they realize how much their girlfriend or their wife has changed and how demanding it is and how much of an increase in responsibility it is for them to now be expected to provide for three people, partner and child. And most of these kids have not been parented or fathered effectively, so they don't know how to shoulder the responsibility of their sex organs and what comes out of that. So you end up with people that weren't parented effectively and don't understand the responsibility or the ins and outs of the birthing process. And so it's kind of like taking an amateur boxer and throwing him in a gladiator match and saying good luck. But we're talking about everyday life here.
Yeah.
So the point I'm making is the education's critical. But, the first words out of my mouth when I saw Donald Trump give $2 trillion as a stimulus package, I said, one, that's the worst thing you could have done, because if we spent $2 trillion educating people on the kinds of things we're talking about and basic health concepts, we wouldn't ever have a COVID pandemic of any type. And if we did, we'd heal very quickly from it and it wouldn't be a big deal. But, people were all excited about the stimulus package. I'm like, you ever think about who's paying for that?
Right.
That wasn't a gift.
Yeah.
That wasn't a rescue.
You're going to catch up on that later.
That was a loan that will come with very high interest. And it also encourages a lot of people. You remember about 75% of people hate their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So if all of a sudden you're locked in your house and you're getting money handed to you and you're playing with your video games, you can easily fall into the sort of illness behavior syndrome where you think, wow, all I got to do is have COVID and someone's going to keep giving me money. And so my point is that we really have a complete need for a revolution of education and a revolution in health and many other revolutions, because if you add all these things together, we're approaching a tipping point from which there's not a lot of positive outlook.
Well, that act in itself from Donald Trump, I mean, you look at that from a parent perspective, right? Let's play imaginary games and say Donald Trump's daddy and we're all his children, and he's just gone, here's $2 trillion. Whether it has interest or not is irrelevant. It's the fact that act of providing something to the child to say, here you go. You are cared for. You are looked after.
Yeah.
You look at the modern household in today's day and age, like it takes, this is what's frustrating, and I'll put my hand up and say I am one of these hippie parents, but it takes a very special parent to participate in a child's life actively without just giving them an iPad to sit in front or a laptop to sit in front or go watch TV or here, have a packet of chips or here's some ice cream or, all of that shit together. It's like we're not participating in a child's life. Right. I say to my clients all the time, you want the best self-development book you can ever read? Read a parenting book. Yeah. Right. I read this book, Discipline Without Damage. It absolutely changed the way I was as a father. I have 4 children. And this as a father, you're a different father to each of your children because they require different levels. And we have a different contract with them as well as a child and a father. But, that book changed my life because I stepped out of the mold, out of the matrix, out of what my family was telling me to do, out of what society was telling me to do, and actually started focusing on, okay, this little human's going to be a big human one day. How do I want them to be in the world? What do I need to teach them right now so that they can start making the changes when they get older, and I can start making those changes right now.
Yeah.
Right. It's that's where the change happens, is at home.
Yeah. It's very important. I'm curious, what are some statistics on the rates of PTSD in the world today?
So we have over 800,000 Australians experience PTSD every year. 1 in 13 Americans develop PTSD every year, and then the percentage I found was the closest. There was a few across the board, but the most reliable source that I go to often is 3.6% of the world has been diagnosed with PTSD.
What was the percentage of people that develop PTSD every year
in America? 1 out of 13.
Okay, so here's the thing that statistic's not really revealing. We've just talked about how ineffective the treatment approach is. We've also talked about the effect that PTSD can be an accumulative process, which we talked about comes often from dysfunctional parenting and social challenges. And so if you got 1 in 13 people developing PTSD every year, but we don't have an effective system to treat it, it wouldn't take anybody that's skilled at math very long to say, well, if you magnify that by 10, 12, 15, 20 years, you're going to have a completely fucked up society.
Reduce the number of years.
See, here's the thing too, though. Traumatized parents traumatize their children.
Right.
Traumatized teacher traumatize their students. As we'll get into, traumatized section chiefs or sergeants or leaders in the military traumatize everybody underneath them. And traumatized billionaires traumatize the whole world, and traumatized medical doctors traumatize the world. I don't think here's Here's the question, guys. Who am I talking about? Answer, turn on your television for 5 minutes. Yeah, so it's a pretty serious problem.
Well, they're saying, if we're looking at it, 1 in 13 people are medically diagnosed.
Right.
We're not talking about another pandemic in itself is the other percentage of people that are identifying or relating with it.
Yes.
The idea of PTSD as a symptom to either gain financial benefit, to gain reputation, to gain social standing, to gain identity in a family system.
Or to get support where they are lacking connection.
So we're creating all these compensatory behaviors simply by not understanding ourselves better or having a decent framework of education to provide to our people.
Yeah.
To our civilization.
Yeah. Well, you've had quite a potent personal journey, what I would classify as a hero's journey, just to sort of lend some credibility to how you know so much about this and how you got into it. Why don't you go ahead and give us an overview of ultimately what led to you getting PTSD or realizing you had it, the challenges you faced, and how you ultimately turned your nightmare into a dream that's now helping many people in common situations.
So I served in the military for over a decade. I joined when I was very, very young. Just before I was 17, I signed the papers to go in, and I left when I was 17, left home. Now, I'd been in and out of home from the age of 14. I'd moved away, and I had gone to partake in a professional soccer career, which started my disassociation from the family system. I started to identify myself as an independent person and having this reality and how I was perceiving myself in my reality. And at this point, I imagined that this is where my personality grew into what it became for me in the military. Now, when I got into the military, I was young, I was super fit, I was cocky as all hell. You either liked me or you just didn't. There was no real in between, and I was a really good operator. I was good at my job, and I performed really well.
What was your job?
I got in as logistics. So I was working in aircraft spares in warehousing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do everything from dispatch to stock taking to sending parts overseas for all airframes mostly. And so after about 4 years doing that role, I'd quickly made a reputation for myself. I was in Australia, we call them a larrikin. So I was a bit of a larrikin.
What's that mean?
Like a young fella that he's like kind of naughty, does, rascal type things.
We call them coyotes.
Coyotes.
Or tricksters.
That was me. And so I put a lot of people off guard, specifically higher ranking. And, that was to a detriment and also a benefit, because the challenges that I faced with relationships with higher staff really offered a chance for me to develop, right? Because what they were seeing and what they were reporting on wasn't inaccurate. I was being a shit, I was still very, very good at what I did, but I was being a shit. And to that, I got the nickname Shit Magnet. And this is where, my reputation actually started to affect me, because I was striving to join Special Forces and be an operator. And so I knew that when I joined, because my father was military, my grandfather was military, great-grandfather was military. And so I was joining a long line of men in my family who'd served their country. And to me, that was something that I wanted to strive for and be better for. I wanted to do better than they did, right? And it was very egoic. Now, my reputation grew into a point where it was affecting me personally, and it started to show up in my relationships, in my marriage that I was in. I got married very, very early. I got married when I was just 18. Actually, it was like a week after my 18th birthday, thereabouts. And so I didn't even know myself as an individual, let alone in a serious committed relationship.
Well, I can harmonize with you there. My first wife got pregnant when she was 17, and I we got married and we had our first child 2 weeks after I turned 18. So
Life quickly tells you what's up.
yeah, it was out of the frying pan and into the fire.
Into the fire. And so what I didn't know and what I've accessed since then in my healing is that I was suffering. I was suffering as an individual because I'd skipped so many steps emotionally, right? When you join the military, you quickly become an adult because you're forced to become an adult. You're doing real world shit, and you have a high level of responsibility in your role, no matter what that is.
And punishment for not doing the job right.
Dude,
And it can be psychologically demanding punishment. Believe me, I've seen a lot of it go down.
Yeah. And if I wasn't punished, I was being threatened that I was going to be punished.
Yeah.
And so already my nervous system was on high alert. I was always looking behind my shoulder and watching my own back. I didn't trust anyone, pretended that I did, but never trusted anyone. Further down the line, a couple of years after I started training to join to go to selection for special forces, right? So I committed a whole 12 months where I pushed my body to its physical and emotional limits. I remember laying in the bush one night. I was on an overnight nav and I was just lost. I was so empty because I had been drained emotionally of where I was in life, and physically I was pretty fatigued. I was doing, upwards of 50-kilometer pack marches with 75 kilos plus simulated weapon and water through mountainous terrain. And, the first time I applied for selection and went through the process and I didn't get accepted, I was pretty heartbroken. My world crushed me, because that's what I was identifying with. That's what I was going to be. I started to, arrive in my reality as a special forces operator, even though I wasn't one. I knew that I have to shift the way that I was in order to become that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I went back to the unit, and as you can imagine, I was like fully resenting the unit I was at, my job. I didn't want to be there. I hated it. I became an obstructionist, still really good at what I did. And I always looked out for the squadron and my squadron peers. But what I was putting out was what I was drawing in as well, and because I had negative energy towards my work, I was drawing that in from my peers. Now, I was very unfortunate and fortunate to arrive under the guidance of a superior that just did not like me no matter what I did.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I was bullied by this person for, I would say, the better half of 2 years. Right. And to the point where this person had started to recruit more higher superior, and my colleagues, who one was one of my best friends at the time. This person had got promoted above me. He had a really good report, and they started to kind of gang bully me.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I'm not saying I'll take full ownership and responsibility of my actions because I was a shithead, and also I wasn't prepared to handle such ferocity and resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went through this for 2 years, to which I decided to go back for selection again.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, I got injured, really, really injured through my process. And I returned and said, I'm not doing this again. I was having suicidal thoughts. I was partying, taking lots of drugs. I was drinking heavily. I reached out to for support in my system, and it wasn't understood what I was going through. And so the intensity of it wasn't received that way. And so it was like, hey, we'll just take you down here and we'll get you to see the base psychologist. And that journey didn't eventuate successfully for me. I really had to go through the shit to find myself.
Mm-hmm. Maybe that's what your soul needed you to do.
It definitely was at that time, Paul. It was, it was the pain doctor I needed at the time.
Yeah.
And so reflecting on that, I chose to take a different path, and I went and applied to become a PTI, or physical training instructor.
Right.
This role is mostly in the Commonwealth. It's not in the States, nor any of the other countries this side, but the role is essentially a strength and conditioning coach in the military for the military.
Yes.
When you become a PDI, you start to specialize in different areas of health and fitness, and you become that specialist to the unit as that. My specialist, I ended up training the security forces, the dog handlers, and I created a very comprehensive strength and conditioning rehabilitation platform for them. We were experiencing high volume of injuries due to, long hours of like pulling tension from guiding dogs and just some of the roles that they were partaking in. They were starting to experience a high amount of injury. And so my role was to mitigate the risk of that getting worse and start strengthening the new people coming through.
Hi, everyone. Please raise your hand if you enjoy having dried out, aged-looking skin. Wrinkled skin, acne, skin blemishes that make you look unhealthy, or skin that itches from lack of supportive nutrients. No hands? Just what I expected. Even though I'm a 60-year-old man, I still want healthy skin because looking good helps me feel good too. Our skin is a living barrier that protects us from the sun, the elements, and a myriad of invasive organisms that try to enter us through our skin. Anyone that understands skin knows that good complexion begins on the inside, and that's exactly why Organifi created Organifi Glow. So you and your family can be healthy, stay young, and feel and look great from the inside out. My family and I love Organifi Glow, and so does our skin. This refreshing blend of organic nutrients not only tastes great, it supports your body's innate collagen production and promotes brighter, radiant skin. Boost your hydration and nourish your skin with 13 clinically studied superfoods. And unlike most companies that claim to be organic, Organifi does use certified organic nutrients and has been the only company that could show me their certifications upon request. Organifi Glow supports and promotes collagen synthesis so you regenerate beautiful skin naturally, supports and promotes hydration, nourishes your skin from the inside out by optimizing skin hydration. Organifi Glow includes tremella mushroom, which provides 5 times the moisture of hyaluronic acid, which is commonly used in skin products to increase moisture. Organifi Glow offers a delicious raspberry lemonade taste, but unlike most plant-based products, is certified to be free of glyphosate, which is extremely important today. It also includes plant-based collagen from bamboo, which is a very rare ingredient because most collagen is animal-based. Not only that, Organifi Glow includes bioavailable vitamin C from acerola cherry with all its natural cofactors that support absorption and supports your immune system at the same time. Additionally, it's important to remember that your skin is often a reflection of your gut health. The collagen and prebiotic fiber in Organifi Glow has been shown to improve gut health by repairing the gut lining and feeding healthy bacteria in our microbiome, so not just your skin, but your whole body gets nourished. To get your Organifi Glow and love your skin, go to Organifi.com/Chek20. And I'll even make it better. All Living 4D listeners get 20% off when they use the promo code capital C, capital H, capital E, capital K 20. So your promo code is Chek20, all in caps. Enjoy Organifi Glow. We love it. I love it. And I know you will too.
And so I became this PDI, I assumed the identity, and my career started to be tolerable. I was not, however, emotionally stable. I had a lot of repressed anger, rage, shame even, because, I'd gone through this journey of being, addicted to, being addicted to trouble, being addicted to resentment, being addicted to pain and shame, and putting myself in that environment. We talked about that at the beginning, looking for it if I wasn't getting it. This showed up in my relationship, showed up in my work. There was a few more incidents that occurred in my time. One specifically was when I come in on somebody who was trying to take their own life. It was a student of mine. They're still with us. I was able to, respond to that situation adequately, and I was able to resolve this situation and actually spent a lot of time with them in integration after that. And I feel at this stage the healing was for both of us, in me as the facilitator and them as the person needing healing. And And that really started to shift what I was experiencing in terms of blockages, like emotional blockages and energy blockages. And I started to see a lot of injuries come through. I had a lot of imbalances because my body was creating compensatory behaviors as a result of these trapped emotions starting to manifest physically. I was playing soccer at the time for a local club down home, and I got severely injured, like really injured. I had 3 broken ribs and a torn left hamstring. Now, I was required to be at work because I was the only one in my section. We had small sections as PDIs. I was one of 4 at that time. One was a sergeant and then 3 corporals. The 2 other corporals were away. One was deployed, one was away somewhere else, and then my sergeant was away as well. Now, my sergeant and I had an uncomfortable relationship. I did my duty and I tried to do it to the best of my ability, and I obeyed orders because that's what you do in the military. But there was no respect from me to him or him to me. And so that relationship was very present. That built over time, and once again, that bullying started to come back into my career in the military. I got isolated and target tested for steroids, to which I was taking peptides at that time to heal my injuries because I was really struggling at work. My role was to be physically fit and be able to take people through training and physical assessments. And I couldn't do that with broken ribs or a torn hamstring. And so I was taking a peptide to heal these ailments, and I got isolated, got targeted by my sergeant, found positive, and then I went through 2 months of extensive investigation, to which I was consistently bullied through that as well, threatened. There was a whole lot of stuff that went on there. I elected to discharge, and right before I did that, I was actually afforded the opportunity to go and talk with my high command officer, the one who ran the squadron, pulled me in, hats were off. It was a personal conversation, kind of mate-to-mate type situation, and I was offered the opportunity to be medically discharged. Now, because I was so thorough with recording all of my medical issues throughout my career, I actually had an extensive list of medical ailments that I was leaving the military with, to which I was medically discharged. Before I left the military, I went on a holiday, and this was what tipped the cup. This is what overflowed the cup. I went on a holiday with my wife, my new wife, who I'd met on my last deployment to the Middle East. She's American military, or was American military. And we went to the Caribbean on a cruise with her family. We were in Tulum on this beach, and my brother-in-law was in the water as I was going in to get more drinks for everyone. As I'm going in, he starts yelling at me, and he's telling me to come down. He's got my nephew in one arm, and then he has this guy who is dead in his other arm, dragging him up the beach. I go down, retrieve this gentleman, drag him up the beach, and we start working on him. We remove the kids, and big commotion. Everybody comes around, work on this guy for at least 15 minutes until I do a handover with an ER nurse that was present on the beach as well. She takes over. We get the ER from the island or the city to come and retrieve this guy and take him to the hospital, and he gets taken away. He died. He was dead when I had him, or when I was working on him, but he died. This was the moment where everything come to a culminating point for me, right? Like, this was something that I was not conditioned to deal with, because why would I, right? I responded in a way because I was trained to a point to know how to respond. I had countless first aid courses to stay current in the military. I'd had the incident with, alleviating the situation where I found that student trying to take their own life, trying to hang themselves. We also had someone while I was deployed as well in the Middle East trying to do the same thing, to which I was still in that environment as well, participating. And so I was not conditioned to be a part of this situation. And so I responded accordingly, but I chose not to deal with it or process it, try to push it down. To me, I felt weak because I was having these feelings of emotion. I felt so sad. I felt so scared. I felt like I just felt empty, And so I chose not to process these situations, and it had all come to a point. bullying, missing out on selection and doing the job I'd entered the military to do. I did over a decade in the military. I put up with so much shit. Yeah, I brought a lot of it on myself, but at some point, it's a 50-50 split in the relationship. Each person's playing a role, and I didn't call all of it in. There was that. There was the 3 circumstances to where I was dealing with dead bodies. Now, when I left, I got out, and my wife had just moved to Australia, and she left the American military, sold her house, gave her cats away, sold her car, moved in with me. I just left the military, didn't have a job, no financial support. My previous wife had just deployed. I had both my daughters. So my new wife was stepping into motherhood straight away, not knowing what to do. I was unemployed, new relationship, going through a divorce, had the children, going through my own process, completely stressed, shell of a man, was not providing as I was taught to provide as a man, or my idea of how I was supposed to provide as a man. Long story cut short, I started a few businesses. I found my footing. I got jobs. I had money to support my family, and I got through that. But there was an episode where our good friend Mike Bledsoe was talking to somebody about ayahuasca. I'd heard Aubrey talk about it. I'd heard Mike talk about it, and it kind of passing. I was just fresh out of the military. Plant medicines wasn't a thing to me, And so when I'd heard this final episode, I went home and I said to my wife, I said, babe, I'm going to do some research on this plant medicine ayahuasca, and I'm going to, search for a way to go and sit in a ceremony. Divine intervention, the job I was in, presented me with the person who needed to show me the connection. Within a month's time, I was sitting in my first ayahuasca ceremony in Australia, and it changed my life. It changed the lens I looked through. It changed my life. It didn't heal me. It changed the way I saw myself in my own reality. It gave me permission to feel love and compassion for myself, no matter what I was or what I was perceiving myself to be. Outside of my family systems, my social systems, that's what it gave me. At my first ayahuasca ceremony, and just to backtrack a little, when I left, I went through over 25 hours of MRIs, CT scans, blood scans, bone scans, countless hours of psychiatric care to try and get support from the VA. Same old story. I imagine you can guess what happened at the end of that. I didn't get support. Or I did intermittently, and then they said, we're not going to support you. But I had an extensive list of both mental health conditions that they were diagnosing me with and physical conditions, included but not limited to osteo and rheumatoid arthritis. Right? They were the major compounding physical ailments I had. PTSD, bipolar, major depressive disorder were the top mental mental health conditions I had. Now, at this ayahuasca ceremony, I was coming out of the first night, and I was going to sit in the grass, and a friend of mine was sitting out there, and he was doing this breathwork thing. And he says, hey man, you want to come do some breathwork? I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Yeah, let's do it. He just finished DMT. So I hit a DMT, and he brought me in. And the breathwork was more powerful than the night I just sat with grandmother. Right. And so it opened up more of me to what I now know. All the purging that I'd done the night before allowed enough tissue to release enough information that I had access to more information now. And so the breath work took me to that space. It took me to a non-ordinary state where I could start to access different levels of my consciousness and all the things that had happened to me, all the things that were happening for me. And so I knew in that moment, this is it. I'm going to go learn about this thing, about this practice of breath. And then the next 5 years, I spent every single penny I had. You ask my wife, she's still a bit, upset about it all. I spent every penny I had, every waking hour I had. I sought out the best in the world, and I went and knocked on their door and said, hey, teach me. I went and practiced it. I practice in group settings, one-to-one, retreat spaces. And what I learned was my journey that I'd just gone through, everybody's doing it. Every single day, everybody is going through that journey in their own way, And so to me, it was a no-brainer. My soul had brought me to this space to come back and be of service to the world, to pass this education on.
Mm-hmm.
And I committed myself to that, and I haven't stopped.
Yeah.
I'm still going, you know. In that 5 years, I healed my body physically and emotionally through breath work. There are a lot of other elements: food, movement, sex, social setting. Guys, this is the big one. If there are people in your life that are not filling your cup and taking away, take them out of your life, even if it's just for a moment, right? That was a big one for me.
You mean toxic relationships?
Toxic relationships.
People that just aren't supportive and are drainers, energy drainers, and
projectors,
vampires,
energy vampires, you know.
And oftentimes, unfortunately, they're family members.
Often. And that's where we get to learn compassion, because they've not necessarily been taught or know either.
Yeah.
And they are difficult conversations to have with family. They're very difficult conversations to have, because the version of you that is presenting yourself to the family now is not the version they know. And they need you to be the version that they know. That's comfortable for them.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not that version, it's very discomforting.
Yeah.
But it's out of alignment for you if you're not this version of you, the true, authentic version or expression of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so I put this protocol, this practice to work. It's not the fix. It's a vehicle. I said this to you before. Like, breathwork is the vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding the nervous system is what got me over the hump to understand my body and my soul.
Mm-hmm.
And from that point, I was able to heal myself physically and emotionally and be able to provide this work forward. Now, am I fully healed? I would suggest not. I am always learning, and I'm an iteration every single day.
Mm-hmm.
But every single day I wake up and I'm alive, and I realize that, oh shit, I got another day.
Mm-hmm.
What a gift.
Well, you also know you have tools to work with. I mean, you know, if you're a woman stranded on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere and you don't know how to change a flat tire or fix an engine, it's pretty scary. But if you've got mechanical skills and you say, well, this is a pain in the ass, I'm about to get wet in the rain, but I can change the tire, or I can, you know, find out why fuel's not getting into the engine or something, then it's you know, you got tools, so you don't feel disabled or incapacitated. It's more of just something you got to deal with. But unfortunately, the entire medical system and education system we have really doesn't give us tools. It creates codependent people that always have to spend money on somebody else to rescue them, which usually isn't really a rescue. It's some kind of a cover-up of the symptoms, you know, like if you're depressed, well, here, take this pill. You won't be depressed anymore. But
Right.
what they don't tell you is you won't have a mind either.
That's exactly right. And then the root cause will still be there
Yeah, oh yeah.
when you come back.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm in a hurry between engagements, lunch, or dinner, and dinner won't be ready for a while. So I just want to eat something delicious that's quick and easy. And that is when I say, thank God for Paleo Valley. Paleo Valley has extremely high standards and only uses the highest quality, cleanest sources for their animal and plant food products. And they have excellent jerky meats neatly packaged so you can take them anywhere and never be stuck without something great to feed your beautiful body and stabilize your mind. I love their pasture-raised turkey sticks in the original and cranberry orange flavor. Angie, Penny, and the kids absolutely love their grass-fed beef sticks, which come in jalapeno summer sausage, garlic summer sausage, teriyaki, and original flavors. I can assure you Paleo Valley's meat sticks are so good you could literally make a meal of them or have them as snacks, and you'd feel satisfied and satiated and know you've fed your body top-quality nutrition that will make your cells dance for joy. Yoo-hoo! Paleo Valley has lots of other great additions to meet your food and nutrition needs, and their website is loaded with great articles, podcasts, recipes, and more. Go to www.paleovalley.com. To get your 15% Living 4D discount, use the code CHEK15, all small case, CHEK 15 on checkout. The whole family will be satiated, nourished, and glad you did.
One of the projects I'm working on at the moment as a way to demonstrate, because people question me all the time about this. I've had countless inboxes of hate mail telling me, you know, you didn't see battle, so you don't have PTSD, and what you're saying is false and black magic and hippie and it's bullshit. And one of the projects I'm working on to demonstrate.
That's the sound of their pain talking.
Oh yeah, it's the mirror they don't like looking into.
Yeah.
When I left my my final medical assessment, where I got the piece of paper to say who I was supposed to be as a medical identity, the last response I got from the specialist, who was one of the best treating specialists in Australia at that time in the military, was, you're going to be in a wheelchair by 35. I hope you know that. And I said, okay. Meanwhile, I'm like, no, the fuck I'm not. No, I'm not. And the fire in me, my soul, was like, you're not. You're going to heal your body, and then you're going to show everybody how to do it themselves, because they know how to do it. And so one of the projects I'm working on is I'm about to run across Australia to demonstrate. 34 in September, 7th of September, and that is the day I will leave Margaret River to start running 88 ultra marathons consecutively to get to Byron Bay, because my body can do that, because I've been able to heal it.
Yeah.
And I do that now today. Like, I have long runs and I come back and I'm straight into my recovery. I'm into my breath. I'm into my meditation. I'm into non-inflammatory foods.
Well, I hope you're doing the breathing and the meditation while you're running.
Always. I have a metronome that I listen to, because I can get in some pretty deep states of consciousness when I'm running, and I forget about my body, and I'm like kind of astral traveling with my body.
Yeah.
And so the metronome keeps my foot in place. So it's been really, and now I use music as well. I use music with the beat to get my metronome on. But yeah, it's a beautiful tool to utilize, and it's a long journey. It's not something that happens overnight.
No real healing is.
At all.
If it wasn't that way, we wouldn't grow from it.
Right.
Pain, you've heard me use the term the pain teacher, which I created to show that when pain comes into your life, it's because there's something that you've come to learn, and either you've been avoiding the lesson, so the soul says, okay, we're going to give you yourself now. You have to deal with the consequences of what you're creating, so you can take stock of what you're using your God-given creative power to create. I think one of the challenges that we have worldwide, not only as a people, but also due to what's called the negative bias of the nervous system, which is to look for threats in the environment because we evolved in a dangerous environment, is that people tend to orient themselves towards what's wrong with themselves or what's wrong with their life, because the nervous system's oriented toward the negative. And look, everybody knows bad news sells. I mean, how many times have you turned on the news to see a celebration of so-and-so giving birth, or someone turning 100 that's still able to exercise, or, any of the million things that we could see to give a positive inspirational message to the world. But no, it's just death, destruction, and, lock your house, the devil's coming, buy this product or you're going to die. And everybody's got this disease, this virus, whatever. It's just endless, right? So it's actually a challenging situation, because biologically we're oriented toward threats. And then we're programmed from the very beginning of our life to be concerned about what concerns our parents. And they're just the apple that fell off the same tree that their parents were on. And so you end up getting enculturated into a psychological orientation towards what is wrong. And, if you look at Angeles Arian's 4 primary causes of addiction, I'll see if I can remember them all, but she traveled the world. She was an amazing shaman and an anthropologist. And she traveled to, I think, over 110 countries, speaking to the elders, speaking to medical professionals, and speaking to addicted people, doing interviews to see what they thought was the cause of addiction. And she did this for 10 years, and then she tabulated her data, and she identified there was 4 common denominators that lead to addiction. One of them is focusing on what's wrong. 2 is perfectionism. 3 is being raised in a family that has provides an intense environment. 4 is the need to know. And we're raised in schools where we are praised for and rewarded for being good at memorizing other people's books. Has nothing to do with our actual learning ability, but we are taught that the more we can know and regurgitate, the more love we get, the more special we are, and the easier our life is, and the better the grades you get.
Right.
So we get addicted to learning because it gives us a sense of self, and it gives us a sense that we're wanted, needed, and valued. We are raised in environments where our parents and society constantly focuses on what's wrong. We have a lot of religious programming that we must be perfect or we are not accepted by Jesus or God. And many of us are raised in very intense family environments like I was, or we have the television running, filling the house with the bad news hour, or we're in school and maybe we are athletic and we have a kinesthetic learning style, but 95 to 98% of all education imparted in schools from kindergarten all the way to the highest levels of university comes by way of the mathematical logical learning style, but only 5 to 8% of people in the world learn well that way. So all these kids are indoctrinated into a school system which 95% of them are not equipped to learn that way, so they're constantly measuring themselves against the kids that are natural at mathematical logical learning. So if you get a kinesthetic learner, an audio dominant learner, or a visual dominant learner, or someone who's musically inclined, or Howard Gardner's now identified, I think, 8 or 9 different primary learning styles.
Yeah.
But 95 to 98% of our education comes through the mathematical logical learning style, which is reading and memorization.
Right.
I couldn't read for shit when I was a kid. I failed reading. I had to go to summer school. I hated reading. I never read a book till I was 22.
Now look.
Well, you know, I cured myself. You know, with what I narrowed that down to is I didn't like being told to read things that weren't interesting to me.
Yep.
But when I found things that were interesting to me, I could focus on it because I felt that there was some benefit to be gained. But my point is, like, you get, paradoxically, the greatest athletes, the greatest musicians, and the people that have the greatest potential to fulfill their soul in almost any arena, and 95% of them are then brought into an education system where they can't learn that way.
Right.
And some kid says, I'm going to be a musician when I grow up, and people say, oh, you'll never make a living doing that. You got to go be a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant or something respectable. Yet we're surrounded by, musicians that range from unsuccessful financially but happy as a human being because they're doing what they love to do, to the Michael Jacksons of the world. Or,
right.
And so my point is, when you look at those 4 causes of addiction, they're just everywhere.
Yeah.
And so if you look at what you've been sharing about PTSD and how it develops, those 4 causes of addiction are repeated stressors, and the addiction is the attempt to medicate the very issues that you're showing culminate in a PTSD profile.
And we're medicating the symptoms.
And we're medicating the symptoms, and they've made that one of the most profitable industries in the world.
And they've convinced it, like, to that point.
Which has now become government.
Yeah.
And
we're not going to bite the hand that feeds us. And that person's just convinced us that the cage we're trapped in is a safe space to be in, right? This is the oscillating cycle of being caught in the loop.
You'll own nothing and be happy.
And be happy.
Right.
That's the
and
trauma.
And you know what my
loop.
response to that is? You first. Show me what it looks like. Give me your airplane.
We'll be waiting a while.
Give me your jewels and your gems and your everything, that your mountain of riches you sit on over there that you took from everybody else, and let's see how you do in that cage.
Exactly.
And when you're the little cage monkey, by the way, you need to take all the vaccinations you're making everybody else take too.
The ones you own.
Yes.
Make money from.
Yes.
Yeah. It starts at it starts there at childhood, in that system, whether it's school, whether it's at home, this pass fail, this good bad, even athletes still, everything's external from us. This trauma or this symptomatic medication is coming from an external gratification and not knowing what is actually occurring inside of us or listening to the I itself.
Yeah. A couple of things, just because, I know you got to catch an airplane, so we got about 25 minutes to kind of hit on some key points. There's a few things that rise up in me. What I'm hearing and what I've known, because, I've been dealing with PTSD people for a very long time and had to heal myself from it and have a family and a lot of people in my family and in my life have suffered from these kinds of traumas. But it seems to me that you talked about toxic relationships and the importance of identifying which relationships are not really helping you grow or heal. It seems to me that tribe becomes essential to healing.
Mm-hmm.
What tips do you have for people that feel isolated, alone, segregated, or maybe are in a compromised position because their views on God or their views on religion in general or their views on science or their views on medicine and vaccination puts them in isolation from the people that ultimately they normally need to connect to be part of a family or a social unit, because that's important for our psyche. We're social animals. How do you suggest people go about creating their own tribe or extended families so that they can be with people that are supportive and are mutually supportive? Because a lot of people, this boils down to a complex issue, and the complex issue is it's very well known in psychology. I've actually seen investigations by psychologists saying that the average person in the world today only has about the psychological development of a 12-year-old, which means that people with that level of psychological development, no matter what age they are utterly dependent upon people outside of themselves for the sense of validation, safety, love, connection, and a sense of belonging, right? Which are really the foundation of our sense of ourself. So when it comes to maturing into your own viewpoints, where maybe you don't agree with your mother and father on things about money, sex,
Parenting,
vaccination, medical approaches, and a long list of stuff today, if you're not ready to go on your own, but you don't know how to create tribe, you can actually find yourself depressed.
Oh, yeah.
First, very anxious, and then depressed. And I think personally that's part of the reasons we have so much suicide today, is because people really feel there's nobody that they can relate to. There's nobody that understands them, or there's no place for them to go to feel love and support. I'm just curious, did you go through having to build your own tribe and sort of recreate your social circle so you fit in? And if you did, how did you do it? And what are your suggestions for other people? Because I mean, don't you agree that this is important for healing?
Yeah, 100%. That point right there of finding tribe outside of where you currently are, that's the piece of the puzzle. Because it'd be taking a true avid, COVID believer, someone fully, trusting the system, believing everything that's put through the media, generalizing now, but it'd be like taking someone like that and they've said, okay, I don't really want to believe in this anymore, and then trying to guide them to the next place. They've got no idea where to go. They don't even know who they can trust. It's the same situation coming out of a traumatic cycle of life.
Or out of a cult.
Out of a cult, right? A brainwashed cult. Now, in my experience, more recently, I do a lot of work with veterans. Right? I'm doing some beautiful work with an organization called Warrior Angels Foundation, and it's headed up by two beautiful brothers of mine, Andrew Ma and Adam Ma, both veterans themselves. And what they've done is create a space for veterans who are experiencing trauma of all different levels to come and feel part of a tribe that has that energy and that environment of what we come from, that identity we left of being military, but it's not that anymore, right? Because that's the struggle, the shift in identity. In my experience, veterans and non-veterans, people suffer in their environments to trust or find tribe because what the support network they have currently is related to the trauma they're experiencing, whether it be parents, partners, friends. It's related to the trauma. I was very fortunate. Most of my friends, when I left the military, stopped talking to me. I was very fortunate. So, and mind you, I'd left a marriage that I was in for 11 years. So we had collective friends together. And, I stopped communicating with a lot of those people. And that was a blessing because I was put into a position where I needed to find me first, and then I needed to find my tribe.
If you don't find yourself first, then you don't know who your tribe is.
You're going to carry that baggage from the last life into the new life, and you're going to project yourself or what you're perceived to be onto the new tribe.
And when you do find a new tribe, they'll get rid of you because
straight away
they just tried to get rid of those types of relationships.
They'll see right through you, and that's how you'll know when you find your tribe is that they accept you. Your fully expressed version of you, they will pull you in and they'll hold you, right? They'll hold the space. Now, I did go through that process. Yes, definitely. I actually had childhood friends come back into my life that I hadn't spoken to for years and just magically appeared. And guess what they appeared on? The subject of plant medicine.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
What a coincidence.
We've all found the medicine chest. Many of you are aware of the importance of magnesium, but very few are aware that most of the magnesium products out there are not high quality and seldom do what they say they'll do on the bottle or the package. But Bioptimizers has produced the most comprehensive magnesium breakthrough product on the market. I've got Wade here to tell us a little bit about it. Wade, what makes your magnesium breakthrough product so unique?
Well, I think because we combine a variety of magnesiums. In fact, we use 7 different types. So if you look at all the research papers out there, you'll see that they'll use various magnesiums, whether it's orotate, malate, sucrosomial is a hot one that's just come out recently, and they're rated on bioavailability. But the biggest component that a lot of people don't understand with magnesium is that different types of magnesium are uptaken by different parts of the body or different organs, some in your brain, some in your nervous system, some are vasodilators. And so there's a variance in people's responses depending on what they need magnesium for. So we went out to try and solve this problem by combining all 7 of the best magnesiums into one single capsule, which was very difficult because number one, the bonding size was different. The nozzles for the machines wouldn't work. We don't use any fillers or chemical excipients, that's the flow regulators. And then we got them in the caps, and the caps rose. We had to do specialized caps. But when we solved all those problems and turned it out for ourselves, because we were tired of buying, I had a whole counter full of magnesiums. Well, guess what? A lot of people said this was the best magnesium product they've ever taken. And after being in this business for 18 years, it's quickly moved to our number 1 selling product in Bioptimizer history.
What are just 2 or 3 things that magnesium is really supportive of? I know sleep challenges is one of them. What are some of the other key issues?
Well, it acts as a downregulator for your nervous system to kind of help you relax and go into, out of fight or flight. And that's the biggest factor, especially today in a high blue light, electromagnetic frequency world that we find ourselves in, a high stimulus environment. It's also critical for vasodilation. And vasodilation increases blood flow. And many times when we are suffering from a variety of pain or conditions in the body, it's because we're not getting oxygen in or toxins out of those tissues. And you've written a lot about it in your work. And so magnesium breakthrough, because it's so powerful and not available in North American diets because of what we've done with farming, It's a great way to augment your diet, and it's easy to get. You go to magnesiumbreakthrough.com or magbreakthrough.com/living4D. You can get a 10% discount, and it's a money back guarantee. If it's not the best magnesium you've ever taken, you get your money back.
MAG breakthrough.com, magbreakthrough.com/living4D. And is there a discount for the listeners?
10%
All
for
right.
all the listeners.
All right, give it a go, you guys. Everything I use from Bioptimizers is the best I've ever used. That's why I love Wade and Bioptimizers. So you've heard how it's made, why it's made, and how it works. If you want the best, go get it. By the way, for those of you, especially young people listening, don't get it in your mind that all you got to do is an ayahuasca journey. Everything will be all right.
No.
Because the long list of people that got PTSD from using too much or too big a dose has come to my doorstep is significant. And we've kind of opened Pandora's box.
Oh, yeah.
And, plant medicines are like guns. They can keep you safe and they can feed you.
Yeah.
But they can also get you killed.
Yeah, that's right.
I've known 7 people to die messing around with plant medicines.
It's a growing trend right now.
Yeah.
And when I say to that story, I found, old childhood friends who I grew up playing soccer with, went to school with, come back into my life because of plant medicines. It was because we were doing the work. We were healing ourselves.
Yeah.
And we just happened to find ourselves in that work.
Yeah.
Now, in that, mine led me to education. I started to develop myself as a master breathwork practitioner. I found myself in a different country, meeting different people, and one of those people just happened to be part of my soul pod. And then that person invited me to this space, and then I found the rest of my soul pod. Now, in that, to be more to the point of creating the environment, or what we're looking for, what I can suggest in finding your tribe is, and it's very difficult to just come out and say, hey, go talk to somebody or go find somebody that you don't know that you can, ask questions. It's very hard to just suggest that, right? Because to me, it's been divine intervention, right? Great Spirit has come and said, hey, Will, this is the person you need to meet. Or, hey,
I think that's there for all of us if we're open to it.
that's right. And if our views are being challenged, and we're taking a moment to really consider how we feel about our views being challenged, I would assert that you're on the path, or at least about to start walking the path. What we're creating in this environment, it's here in the States, actually. After my run across Australia, I'll be coming back to do deeper work with the foundation, is we're creating an environment for humans to disconnect from the matrix, right? We're going to be utilizing nutrition, movement, breathwork, medicines guided by professional practitioners, a space of community and tribe, right? Because we need that space to disconnect away from society, away from media, on the land, on organic land, learning how to grow vegetables, how to hunt properly in a ceremonial and reverent way, right? We're creating this space for people to come and do the healing in those spaces. What I've experienced outside of this container and more towards the one-on-one work and the group work that I've done from a therapeutic sense is people are having the deepest healings with absolute strangers. I don't know how many times I've been in a room full of absolute strangers, and 3 days later, we're all in a cuddle puddle telling each other how much we love each other and truly meaning it.
Well, there's sympathetic resonance that goes on throughout the entire universe. And so I think you got to remember the ego is only about 3 to 5% of our consciousness. Some books say as much as 7, but the rest of us is unconscious. And the unconscious is the global internet of self. And so when we have an authentic need within our soul, we're actually sending messages out to other souls that can converge with us for the common good. So things that look like strange occurrences, like a bunch of people that don't know each other ending up in a cuddle puddle, as you say, isn't really that random when you
Right.
really understand the functioning of the psyche. And I think that really helps go back to this issue of how do you find your tribe. I think the first thing you got to do is get clear what values serve you now in your life. For example, if you decide that you don't want to eat shit food anymore and you want to eat organically grown food and put your money into regenerative farming so that your purchase is actually benefiting the planet, or you want to learn about breathing, or you want to learn more about mental emotional self-management, then right away you say, I wonder who else is interested in this stuff. And so you go looking for people that have what I call alignment of values and interests. And birds of a feather start flocking together, and then you share ideas and you grow. And that's how the human being grew into this social animal, and how we got to the point where we can build rocket ships and telescopes and all sorts of stuff. Nobody does anything meaningful on this planet alone. Nobody. Mahatma Gandhi may have looked like he took the country back, but he had to teach the entire country of India how to engage the British non-violently.
Right.
So he couldn't have done it alone, because if they all got out guns and sticks and started a war, they'd still be in the war.
Yeah.
So I'm looping back to the issue of tribe, because one of the most important ways to find tribe is say, what are the values that I choose to live by? And who are the people that share those values? Because it's easier to live by those values with people that already do it.
That's right.
And what are the things that interest me? I think that's the keys to the door of your new tribe.
If you go down, this is for anyone, you go down to a local farmer's market, like a genuine farmer's market.
We've got lots of them around here.
I guarantee you'll meet somebody who's going to be in your tribe.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like you're following a point. Food's a great one, right? Food's a great one. If you decide you want to kick sugar, fantastic. When you decide you want to kick sugar, you've actually got to go looking for food that doesn't have sugar. Where are you going to find that? Well, you're not going to find it
at the supermarket.
I mean, out here in Australia, it's much more accessible. Here in the States, not as much. I mean, you've got Sprouts and whatever.
Whole Food.
You've got those things.
A number of them. Most of those are just better junk, unfortunately.
The lesser of two evils, right? But if you find a farmer's market where the farmer himself is standing there selling his own meat, telling you how the cows have lived and died, and you've got the person there who's pulled the beets from the ground and told you what they've used, I guarantee you, when you start looking for that, you'll start to find those people.
Yeah.
It's the same with when you want to lose weight, but you don't want to go to the gym, so you get a trainer, but you don't want to do that style of exercise, or you don't want to do CrossFit, so you look for something a little different. Oh, there's someone over there teaching a mace. That looks interesting. Go talk to them. They're doing this unconventional way of training. Well, people who else are doing that are very similar to the values that you are now learning that you want to discover.
Yeah.
And for me, I mean, breathwork was it. I found breathwork in my own journey. And then when I decided to invest in education, well, some of it was one-on-one, definitely. But in the group setting, when I was learning breathwork, I found there was more people who were trying to understand the same things as me.
Yeah, that's important. One of the things that I think is important about breathwork, aside from the fact that it's non-toxic, it doesn't cost anything, and you can control it, is that it is really a vehicle by which you learn that you can affect your own physiology and your own mental emotional state. And because you're in control, as you use breath work to grow and heal yourself, you actually begin to cohere into a sense of true self. You realize, I am capable of. I have a tool I can use, and this tool not only helps me, but it can help other people. If I am too wound up, I know how to do this to calm myself down. If I'm feeling lethargic or I'm having a hard time motivating or inspiring myself, then I can stimulate my sympathetic system and I can open up my energetic pathways, and all of a sudden, without coffee or drugs, I feel, hey, maybe I can go for a run now. So I think, to become an adult, one of the things that we have to do is stop using the words "I have to" which are the words of a child, and use the words I choose to. So once you learn breath work, you're choosing to modulate your autonomic nervous system. You're choosing to intervene and influence your whole internal state. And the more you do that, the more of a sense of self-reliance and self-responsibility you have. And then you become more capable of recognizing who else also operates with a sense of self-reliance and responsibility. So you start gravitating toward people that live in a more adult, self-affirmative, proactive manner. And I think the only way we're going to get through the situation the world is in is to start having an adult, self-responsible, proactive manner. Because no matter how fucked up the world is, if there's one thing you can do to guarantee it gets better, it's to make yourself better. And once you do that, you can leave the world knowing you left it better than how you found it.
Yeah.
And then when you start finding other people that do that, well, once you start coupling these minds together, then you get movements like you just talked about with your friends and their ranch that you told me about. You get people like Aubrey Marcus and Kyle Kingsbury building their thing. You know, you've been to workshops here at my Rainbow House where people come eat real food from local farms, where we put money back into the soil, where you drink the best water I can get my hands on, where you are in the mountains and you got a view and you can go barefoot and you can talk to people,
Play music together.
Yeah. You know, create art out of wood, stones, nature. And then running our workshops here, for example, it's always amazing to me to see the friendships that get developed and to see people that sing together are like people that cuddle together. People that lift stones together have great conversations. People that lift weights together. People that breathe together. People that like good food together. And I remember when the lockdowns were still on, I was like, I'm not playing this fucking game. If people want to come do a workshop with me, I told them, look, the government and all these assholes want you to wear your mask, but you're an adult. If you want to wear your mask, go ahead. If you don't, then don't. Yeah. I'm sure as hell not going to handcuff you or stick a thermometer in your face and give you a nocebo test and convince you that you're sick when you're not. And people... I literally had people in tears going, oh my God, Paul, it's so nice to be around normal people.
I witnessed that.
And so what happens is people start coming alive again. And I think some of the simplest things like dancing, singing, sharing life stories, sharing new ideas, eating good food together, breathing together, dreaming together.
That's a good one.
It brings us into a sense of self-empowerment. And I know, like, when I look out at the world, I can look at it and say, we're fucked. Or I can say, we're going through a transition. And the transition we're going through is a transition into adulthood where we have to accept responsibility for our choices and the impact we have on the life that supports us, which is the planet, or the Buddhists call it the great chain of being. And those that don't make the transition are going to die, and they'll have plenty of time to meditate on it. And unfortunately, a lot of them were never educated, so they don't even know they're doing it. And those of us that do make it are going to basically create a world, or we're going to segregate ourselves from whoever's left that's not doing it. And we're basically going to have people that continue to grow and evolve. But if you watch what's going on, the people that get caught in the standard medical model and the standard narrative are getting dumber and dumber and dumber.
Yeah.
And more subservient and more easily controlled and brainwashed. And those that are moving away from it was interesting. One of the studies I saw come out during COVID is that people with PhDs were far less likely to get vaccinated. I'm serious. So what are they showing? People that actually know how to think.
They're making their own decisions.
They're actually saying, wait a minute, that's not real science. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So you see when people actually reach an adult level of discernment and realize if I make this choice and it gets me sick or dead, it's my fault.
That's right.
No matter what the government says.
Yeah.
But everybody else is just being a sheep and going, oh my God, my mother just died, or my sister's now sitting over there with some crazy disease, Epstein-Barr or whatever, neurological disease, or any number of things that this is causing. And so they just go deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. So I think many of the things that lead us into this collective PTSD also give us exactly the level of discomfort we need to realize that we have to solve this for ourselves.
Yeah.
There's nobody coming to rescue us. We have to do this for ourselves. And that's really what it means to grow up, is realize that you have the power within yourself to create the changes that ultimately exemplify freedom and set you free.
Yeah.
And I think really that's a lot of what it sounds to me like you're doing with people.
That's the first thing I start with clients. One of my coaches that I've been with for the last 2 years, he said something to me 2 years ago. He said, your greatest responsibility is that you are responsible for you, right?
Yeah.
And that's the first thing I start with clients, whether it's one-to-one, group settings. It's always that. You are responsible. I also, I piggyback that with Viktor E. Frankl's quote from Man's Search for Meaning. Between stimulus and response, there's a power to choose how you want to respond.
Yes.
All right. And if we can do that by stopping, taking a breath, identifying where we are at right now, and taking in the information that means something to us and deciding upon that, rather than just acting out of this robotic fashion to which we're being signaled by media. You can't go anywhere anymore without being signaled. I mean, I walked through the airport this morning and nearly every single person I saw was like this, looking down at their phone. Now, to me, that signals me. Yeah. That signals a level of stress because it tells me about my relationship that I have with my phone and how I want to be better with it. Right? Mm-hmm. It's signaling me in a way. Now, people who aren't thinking that deep are like, oh yeah, shit, I need to get on my phone. Mm-hmm. Right? You can't go anywhere without the environment signaling your biology to behave in a specific way anymore. And that's what I'm trying to teach is this practice of breath is a way to access what is going on in your nervous system. And if you can take a breath just for a moment, it doesn't have to be this crazy 30 inhale exhales, knock yourself out type thing. It doesn't have to be that. It can be, and that has some merit. But by simply stopping and breathing in and out of your nose and letting your nervous system come down, it's going to be more likely that you're going to make a better decision that is going to be more aligned with your actual values. And you can start taking responsibility for yourself.
And you're choosing to do it.
You're choosing to do it. I teach my children this all the time. My little boy, he's my greatest teacher. Man, he's got some fire in him, and there are moments
I share
where
that with you.
I wish I could just grab him and, but if we stop and I say, all right, man, I know you're worked up. You know what? I'm not changing my mind. The decision I've made for your guidance, take a breath. And when he stops, he's a 4-year-old. He stops and goes, instantly sees body drop. Goes for a second one. The thing he says to me as soon as he does that? All right, Daddy, I'm ready to listen.
Well,
of course you are.
That's amazing. Well, listen, you got an airplane to catch, and I don't want you to have more stress to deal with than is necessary. Where can people find out more about your offerings, what you're up to, and anything you want to share?
So I'm about to do this run across Australia, attempting to set a new Guinness World Record. I am only working one-to-one at this time with people, and you can find me on social media. Instagram's the easiest place, at themind.mechanic. And I get back to everybody who comments or messages. You can follow my journey as I run across Australia. We're filming a documentary and we will have a YouTube channel so you can follow along. And some of my sponsors are actually setting up virtual runs where people can actually participate with the virtual run. So this cause isn't just for me to set this record. This cause is to bring evidence to this work. It's to show people that you have the power in your body to be able to make change, to be able to heal yourself. Yeah. Right. And in that journey, I'll be working closely with veteran organizations to change our contingency plan, which we're having really good traction with. People can find me there and follow along
Awesome.
on the gram.
Great conversation. I think we covered a lot of really important things, not only about PTSD, but about the world. And so great to see that your journey has led you really from being a trickster that feels, unhappy with their environment and their job to being really in your bliss.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
Aho, great spirit.
Aho, great spirit.
Blessings on your run.
Thank you, sir.
I know you'll be just fine.
Me too.
I'm sure you'll have plenty of conversations with great spirit to ease the feet and lighten the body.
Yeah.
Thank you to my sponsors for all your love and support, your amazing products. Thanks to all of you for anything you buy from the sponsors. Helps support the podcast. And thanks for all of you for listening and being willing to live, love, learn, and grow more. Right now, it's time to do it. I look forward to sharing something fantastic with you soon. If you enjoy the podcast as much as I do, please leave a positive comment on iTunes or any of the podcast outlets. My dream is that we all get together and cross-pollinate and educate each other, hold hands, sing, dance, and turn this place into something we are proud of, and disengage from the bullies and let them sort it out while we pray for them. Lots of love. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Living 4D with Paul Chek and today's guest, William Burnett. You can follow Will on Instagram at themind.mechanic as he continues on his travels and with the preparation for his Guinness World Record attempt of running 88 consecutive ultramarathons across Australia in September and October. You can join Will in his training at the Project Light Running Club at strava.com/clubs/1035725. That's strava.com/clubs/1035725. Check out warriorangelsfoundation.org to see the work they do in providing a container and space for veterans to heal their trauma. Follow Paul on Instagram at paul.chek, on Twitter at paulchek, or on his YouTube podcast channel, youtube.com/living4d with Paul Chek. You can watch more on Paul's blog at paulcheksblog.com, and you can get your free subscription to Chek videos and more at the Chek Institute's new media site, jakiva.com. You can read the show notes and find links to the resources mentioned in this episode at chekinstitute.com/podcast. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and a warm review at the top of the show page on Spotify or at the bottom of the show page if you are listening on Apple Podcast.